Should you pursue a LTD claim and an ADA accommodation at the same time? Well, I will tell you as an experienced risk disability attorney that often an ADA request for accommodation and a long-term disability claim conflict. And that conflict is a product of how the policy or plan will define the definition of disability and material and substantial duties of a person's occupation. Have you looked at what your policy or plan says? Now, one of the most common definitions internally will set up a conflict between the request for accommodation and a claim that you are disabled. Why? Well, look, disability can be defined to mean that because of an injury or sickness, you can't perform each of the material and substantial duties of your regular occupation. Material and substantial duties is often defined as those duties that are normally required for the performance of your regular occupation and can't be reasonably omitted or modified. You can't be disabled by the terms of the policy or the plan if the material and substantial duties can reasonably be omitted or modified. That's the language here. So how does your request for accommodation come into this? Well, pretty simply. In my opinion, pursuing an ADA accommodation and an LTD claim doesn't really preserve your options. In fact, I think it limits your options. It's either or, and depending on how you pursue this, you can screw yourself both ways. If you may think that, look, if your employer can accommodate you, you can withdraw your long-term disability claim and live happily ever after. Alternatively, if your employer doesn't accommodate your restrictions and limitations, you think you can pursue the long-term disability claim, and when you get terminated, pursue severance benefits. I don't find it happening that way. So I rarely suggest that my clients request an ADA accommodation and file an LTD claim for either total or residual disability benefits at the same time. In my view, that request for an ADA accommodation can destroy your long-term disability claim, and at worst, it can result in your employer taking the position that while there's no possible accommodation, that they have no choice but to terminate your employment. And of course, that will jeopardize your severance pay and potentially other benefits. Remember, your employer doesn't necessarily have to offer any accommodation. The question is not whether they offered an accommodation, but can your occupation be modified or the duties omitted, regardless of what your employer might do or not do. That is the real issue. So the impact can be that not only do you potentially lose your job and screw up your LTD claim, but let's say that the employer doesn't offer any accommodation. Let's say that instead they say, look, we're going to terminate you. We're going to offer you a severance package. Now that sounds good. And you think you can turn around and then pursue the long-term disability claim. And maybe you can, but guess what? There's probably an offset provision in the disability policy or plan that says, hey, look, if you get money, we get to reduce your benefits if we agree that you're entitled to those benefits. So you can ultimately get terminated, potentially get a severance package, and then when you file your long-term disability claim, have to see that your LTD benefits are reduced by what you got by the severance package. That doesn't make a lot of common sense or financial sense. If you have any questions about your rights to long-term disability benefits and what you should be doing in terms of pursuing accommodation with your employer or a long-term disability claim, call me today at 727-894-3188. Don't make decisions that can jeopardize a severance package, your long-term disability benefits, even your continued employment. 727-894-3188.